And it was the first time, I think, and this was the time when sponsorship in this country was on TV was illegal. It wasn't actually allowed. And we sort of found a way of doing it. And I got into such trouble about it,
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Leaf Colectivo. I'm Gil, and with me is the always awesome Wesley Harley, our co-host, who is CMO and Chief Customer Officer here at Leaf. And joining us today is our very, very special guest, Brian Jacobs, founder of BJ&A Consultancy and an undeniable legend on the world of advertising and media agencies landscape. His career spans 40 years. We were just joking before the show that, he kind of almost started with the Mad Men era, just briefly afterwards. But, so there is a lot of stories, I'm sure. There is a lot of also experience. The fact that he remains active, after all of this experience, and, that he's been able to kind of like ride the waves, with the times and with so much change. We thought it would be, very interesting to have that conversation, not only learn from his background, but more importantly, have a look at, what his outlook of the future is, how is he seeing things today. Obviously, the last couple of years, because of, the pandemic and everything, has accelerated the world that we live in, has changed dramatically the landscape. And it would be great to have some of that. So buckle up and enjoy this as we pick the brains of Brian Jacobs. Welcome. For everybody else, Brian, why don't we, start maybe and giving us a little bit of kind of like a background on you.
Okay, well, I started in advertising, not quite in the Mad Men era, but not a long way away from it. Certainly, I was working with people who did remember it. So I started, I think, at the end of the 1960s, so 1969, something like that. And I'd always wanted to work in advertising. I loved ads. It's hard to know quite kind of why, but I just did. And so I wrote to masses of advertising agencies. I chose not to go to university. I wasn't interested in going to university. Instead, I just wrote to a bunch of advertising agencies and asked if I could have a job doing something. And in those days in London, what you did was you started off as a messenger in the advertising agency. And so I got a job as a messenger in an advertising agency in Knightsbridge. There was a guy who was he was like the manager of the messengers. And I remember, this is a long time ago, right? But I remember him really well. His name was Don Tree. And he was like our mentor. His job was to sort of bring messengers in, but that was the route in. And then you went off and did whatever else in the agency. That his plan was always to propose you for jobs, and try to get you jobs. And I wanted to be a copywriter. There was only one problem with that. I was really crap at it. So so I never made it as a copywriter. But Don would always put you up. You've got to remember, this is in the days before email and everything else. So everything was done by memo. And so Don would be the first person, because he would be the one distributing all the memos around the agency. He would be the first one to hear of any job vacancies that were going, or if anyone was leaving, or they were looking for new staff or whatever. And he would put his lads forward, for jobs. That's how it used to work. So I got promoted from being originally an external messenger, which meant running around London carrying very heavy blocks in the days when printers print ads had to be on blocks. And I was then promoted to being an internal messenger, which meant that I got to push a trolley around the agency delivering mail. And then I finished up in the information department, which was like, if the creative team wanted to do a particular ad featuring people in a certain costume, for example, our job would be to look up what were the details of the costumes, or if you wanted to have a shot of someone who was in the army, what sort of things would they be wearing, all that sort of information stuff.
Sounds like something from 1984.
Yeah, I was like a very embryonic Google. I was gonna say, how do you? Because obviously, I'm sure, you will have, agencies at the time will have, a good body of information and content and knowledge that you can, quickly kind of like go and piggyback into, but it's almost like maintaining a library in itself, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was that. Yeah, it was exactly that. It was like a library. And I finished up. I can't quite remember how now, but I sort of finished up in media. I went to work for one of the TV companies in their research department, and then most of my career really from then was I finished up. Most of my time was spent in advertising agency media departments, because in those days, it was all full service. So the advertising agency literally did everything. I mean, sometimes they'd be even responsible for package design or market research, or as well as media placement and obviously creating ads. So, I finished up in the media department of an advertising agency, and sort of went from there.
How much, like being a messenger and starting as a messenger, obviously you get exposed, I'm sure, to, the full vertical, right, of and the whole structure. How much opportunity you get to build relationships?
Well, as a messenger, you didn't, of course. You just knew where things were, But you're right.
But I'm sure that you knew probably more than a lot of other people, because you kind of have eyes and ears everywhere.
Yeah, exactly, and you knew what was going on. You could sort of see what was happening, and also, I remember these were really different days. So I'd always wanted to be in an ad agency. So, for example, most advertising agencies, in fact, to this day, most advertising agencies today do the same thing. If they're presenting for clients, for new business, they'll do it in a studio or in a big meeting room, and there would often be like a viewing place behind. That would be where the if they were going to show ads or show films or something, they would often do it from this like a booth, and if you were smart, you could go and watch the pitch, So I used to go and sneak in and kind of watch what they were doing.
This is probably the best university you could get, really. I mean, because you have almost like front row seats to history, really, and to action, and to see working.
Yeah. I definitely think it feels like and this is just one of many examples, but there's been an atomization of society, and that percolates all the way through, from business right through to home life, and now people are, especially during the pandemic and remote working, like very, very chained to a laptop and a screen. And even in the office, we've been interviewing people for positions, and some of them saying, we are tasked with being at our desks for a certain amount of time, as in, don't stand up and walk around. We need you at your screen for a certain amount of time. And this is in the media industry, the advertising industry. So I find that really interesting, actually, that we're probably missing some, and we're forgetting that we're missing it. People to have worked in
exactly. The advertising agency world. I mean, we'll come on to the media agencies versus the advertising agencies in a minute. But in my day, I mean, when I was starting, at any rate, it was all the same thing. And just walking around the agency was a huge part of what you did. I mean, once you got into, I'm not talking about being a messenger. Once you got into the heights of being in media or copyright or whatever it was you did, just wandering around the agency was a really big thing, because that's how, that really is where ideas often germinate. Someone chatting with you. I know there's the old cliche about water cooler moments and all that, but it really was like that. It honestly was. You'll be chatting to someone about something. I mean, there was one of the agencies I worked in early on. I suppose when I really started my career properly, was a fantastic advertising agency called Davidson Pierce, which is no more. It became part of. Eventually it was bought by Ogilvy, and then it was subsequently offloaded and bought by. It became BMP in effect, and subsequently DDB Needham. But we had the PG Tips account. And if you're sort of boring like me and you remember the history of advertising, we did a campaign featuring chimps, and this was a very famous, in fact to this day people will play back the ads to you. I mean, they'll tell you what the ad said, can you ride tandem, and all that, and do the piano's on my foot, son, and you hum it, I'll play it, all that kind of stuff, and the idea for that genuinely came from the copywriter, a guy called Tony Toller, who was a bit stuck for ideas and went wandering off for a walk and found himself in London Zoo. And only from sort of wandering around London Zoo, back in those days, they did used to do chimp tea parties in London Zoo, chimpanzee tea parties. It was a great draw, and he happened to find himself there, and he thought, well, hang on a minute. There you go. So
that's where the phrase comes from, then, right? That's the source of that phrase, like a chimp's tea party.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. And I mean, they used to come and make the films with these live, these wild. Well, they weren't wild. These chimpanzees. They used to film them for absolutely ages to keep the camera running, because chimp would express its emotions by opening and closing its mouth, and then they would write the script to fit the fit the mouth movements.
When did this start? Because I remember these adverts being on, like, this is like a Proustian rush that I'm getting, like, all the way back to my childhood in the 80s. Like, I can remember watching these so vividly, the PG Tips advert with the chimps and the family at home and the mum and the dad and the kids and the voiceovers.
I do remember once pitching a big American account. I can't remember, actually genuinely can't remember what it was for now, but the creative director went through the agency reel. He was a brilliant man called Norman Berry, and Norman went through the agency reel, and he always used to keep the chimp stuff for the end, because it was by far the most famous campaign we'd ever done. Everyone knew it. And I remember the American guy just said, "Can I just give you some advice, Mr. Berry? You've just got to lose the monkeys." But I remember thinking, okay, we're not going to win. We didn't.
It's funny how you say you started that stuff in the 70s, because even now, when we're running ads, for example, and we're testing lots and lots of different creatives and finding our winners, and you find your winners, and your winners stay your winners for quite a while. I've spoken to, for Go Compare, for example, a lot of the work, we wanted to kind of see if we could move away from some of the stuff we were doing featuring Geo, the opera singer, and not just have that, because when we put ads out, especially on Facebook and Instagram, we would get a lot of hideous comments under the ads. So we're like, let's see if other stuff can work. So lifestyle stuff. So if we're talking about car insurance, people in the right age group driving the right kind of car and stuff like that. And every single time, the winning ad was Geo's face on a green background, and we tested lots of different colours, lots of different copies. We tested his alter ego, the real person, win as well, and it was what people recognised, and that was the winner. That was the winner solidly for 18 months, and I would say that that's going to be the winner. It's going to continue into the future. I've spoken to other big brands that have found the winners, and the winners have been the winners for years on end, and they can't get away from them, because they're the things that people resonate with, and it's that. It's a fact.
It's quite interesting, once you find one of them, you just really shouldn't change them. I mean, they're gold dust. If you can come up with something like that. When I interviewed for some work I was doing for somebody, I interviewed somebody who used to work for Go Compare, and he told the exact same story you just told, about how they tried to move away from the opera guy, and how they kept going back and kept working. He kept working, and I think if you've got a really great property, you stick with it. I mean, it's why I was really interested. I felt quite proud of the industry for once, actually, when a few years ago, when Audi, part of Volkswagen Group, decided to put their creative work up for pitch. And creative work has been BBH's for ever and a day. And John Hegarty famously came up with the Vorsprung Technik line, having seen it on a wall in the factory in Germany. And there's no question that the advertising for Audi over the years has created that brand. I mean, it was just an ordinary, sub BMW lookalike, and BBH's work, without doubt, and the sting of that line has undoubtedly built that brand. And they announced that they were going to put it up for pitch, and a lot of agencies refused to pitch because they just went, why? I mean, you've got a fantastic agency. If you've got any sense, I mean, all you're trying to do is reduce your costs.
And that is, that's a very interesting, like comment, because it's something that we've seen, right? I mean, there is this somewhat disconnection, between, and it's purposely is the soul behind, what we do. And in many ways, you could argue that a lot of people would think it has gone soulless in a way, because it becomes, especially now with data and, and we see it, the way we approach things. Data it's an informant, right? It allows you to kind of like validate, guide you, but ultimately you have to be careful also to kind of like not lose the soul and be, very mindful of, what makes the brand and what's, being able to.
You're exactly right. I mean, that's the thing I think that is the biggest danger, to be honest with you. But, some of the things that that I sort of was involved in now seem to be so incredibly kind of obvious, but at the time they absolutely weren't. I mean, for example, I was invited up to the Edinburgh TV Festival. The Edinburgh TV Festival then, I mean, it's similar now, but then it was absolutely a festival of program makers. So you had all the big broadcasters from all over the world, you had producers, directors, and so on. And it was a really big deal thing. And if you spoke in the main assembly room, it was an audience of 700 or 800 people. I was the only advertising guy. I was the devil incarnate. I was the one who was there to have stuff chucked at him, And I did that. And I remember saying then, this was in 1988, I think it was, or 87 or 88, that when you got all these new channels and, the coming of the internet and all these things happening, what was going to happen was that you're going to have a need for more content, clearly, because someone's going to have to make stuff to fill all the stuff that's out there. And you were going to have to find some money from somewhere, because, who's going to fund all this? Where's it going to come from? And I remember saying you're going to find advertisers getting much more involved in programming and in producing content. And this was an immensely controversial thing to say. I mean, after everyone stopped yelling at me, and calmed down, I got a call about a week or two later from somebody. And she said I was in the audience at Edinburgh. I'd love to come and see you. Now, I'll tell you who it was in a minute, but when she came to see me, she said, I make children's programs for broadcast television. The problem is there's no money in it. There's very limited number of advertisers. The fact is that the broadcasters, the audience is small because it's kids, and so there's no money. There just simply isn't much money, and they're just going out and buying American imports, old Disney stuff and whatever. And I really want to create British programming for kids. And I sort of, the more I got talking to her, the more I sort of quite liked this idea. And so I put a proposal together, and I went up to see Kellogg's, who was a client of mine. And I said, we had a very tiny piece of Kellogg business. And I just said, hey, it must be hard for you because there's not that many kids programs out there. And what there is pretty ordinary. How would you feel about doing this? And I then proposed they should go out and make a series of programs. And I had an idea, we had an idea, me and this person had an idea. And before the end of the meeting, Kellogg's had bought it, which was really scary because I then had to go and do it.
Go and do it, yeah.
And the woman was a lady called Anne Wood, who went on to invent the Teletubbies. So this is before she did that. So she was on her uppers. I mean, she really just she made kids programs, and no one was buying them. And we made with Kellogg's help and support, we made a series of animated cartoons for kids. And it was the first time, I think, and this was the time when sponsorship in this country on TV was illegal. It wasn't actually allowed. And we sort of found a way of doing it. And I got into such trouble about it,
She wasn't on something when she made the Teletubbies, was she?
She wasn't
pretty far out.
So, there was a time after she'd made the Teletubbies, she was the wealthiest woman in Britain, so she didn't do too badly. Some
of the problems, I'm seeing working with brands is that they're saying, like, what's the data saying? What's this data saying? Gives the data. A, a lot of them don't know what to do with the data. But B, data is not going to have any ideas. You're the ideas person. Data doesn't have a vision. It doesn't understand your place in the world, your positioning, your context in the market. It's an after effect. The data. It's telling you. It's the tea leaves of like what's happened and what. And so I think a lot of the brands over the past decade, I think everyone got a bit lazy because it was so easy just to test stuff and the algorithms, and there was so much data, and it was a bit of a free for all. And then you could just we did it with our early product, Leaf Music. We would upload thousands of ads into Facebook and Instagram, and we were getting app installs for like 7 cents an install, and so we were getting shitloads of data through each ad, and we could have tiny variations in each ad, and then we had this mass multivariate approach, like a Hadron Collider for advertising, smashing loads of ads and variants against lots of audiences. Those days are gone, and at the time we were saying, it was data's king, content's dead, data's king. Content is king. It's always been king, and it always will be king. And now we've reached peak marketing data. Content's having to work so much harder again. Now your targeting is content led, because we're getting less and less data about demographics, interest groups. It's all getting much, much broader, and it's going back to like what TV was.
Just today, today I was somebody on Twitter was complaining about an ad that he's being targeted with, and it's like this hideous person, like no shirt inside, just a blazer, like super hairy, big bear, like hipster-ish, and they were promoting a books app. Completely disconnected. And so like I found it jokingly, and then I went into Facebook, and I wanted to look at all the ads that this company was running, and you could take I don't know, like all of those ads, and then you could see the themes, but they're all the different themes were like belong to different companies. There was no one single connector line in between, and it was hideous. It was so awful. And then again, it goes back to just let's see what it works. See what it sticks. But where's the soul of the product? Where is the soul of the brand? What are you trying to convey?
Yeah, and you wonder why it is that. I mean, I do at the moment. I've done in the past. I'm not doing it this year, but in the past I've done quite a lot of work for Kantar, the research agency, and we've done a study. Kantar have done a study called Dimension, and that involves going out and asking. It's actually a very interesting piece of work because it interviews consumers, so about 1,000 consumers in a number of countries. So I think last time it was about 8 countries, so about 8,000 people. And at the same time, we interview industry leaders, and marketing figures and people. And so we hear what consumers have to say about whatever it may be, the media or advertising, and then we hear what the marketers have to say. And you can see what the disconnect is between the two. Because what consumers say now is advertising is very unpopular. I mean, online advertising particularly is unpopular. TV advertising actually is quite popular. And people, quite like TV advertising because it tends to be quite entertaining by and large. I mean, I'm obviously exaggerating, to make a point, generalizing to make a point, but online stuff is unpopular. And you wonder why that might be. And then you think, well, maybe it's something to do, and you probe into why people don't like it and why they feel it's unpopular. And it's often to do with the fact that it interrupts something they're doing. If you're watching TV and an ad comes on, then you have a kind of almost like a contract with the broadcaster. You're watching the TV for free, and you're seeing an ad, and the contract is you're getting the stuff for free, and we're going to put ads in it. Up to a comparatively limited number of ads. If you're doing something online, you're normally doing something. You're looking for something, or you're working, or you're looking for a thing, or you're not just there often just to be leaning back entertained. I mean, obviously that happens, but a lot of the time it isn't like that. And to have these ads keep coming up over and over and over and over again, interrupting what it is you're doing, stopping you achieving what you're doing, can be very annoying for people.
Or even chasing you. chasing you all over. Like I don't think, like people, like some advertisers don't even have respect out of people, and the frequency of showing ads to people is just like through the roof. Like, like we see it with with clients that come our way, and it was like, show a little bit of respect to people. Like it's also like, like the brand that you build, right, and the image that you put to people, right. I mean, you are in control of all those things, right, in many ways.
Actually, a while back now, I bought some new shoes, and they were Echo shoes, right? So why am I seeing ads every day in everything I'm looking at for Echo shoes? I'm not going to buy another pair, I bought the shoes I want, and this retargeting thing is really, really annoying. So, and I think that one of the reasons that we've got to where we've got to is the point Wes was making. We look at the data, and no one thinks about the soul of it, or the appeal of it, or even the entertainment value of it. I mean, there's a very good book written by a creative agency account planner of great renown called Paul Feldwick. And his book is called Why Does the Peddler Sing? And it's a really interesting book, because his point is that advertising is really not that different, really, from the old showman days of Barnum, P.T. Barnum and people like that. It was about creating fame and creating a sense of enjoyment of something, and making a brand famous, or, in the P.T. Barnum days, a character or a particular act famous. And, he said, if you think about it, a lot of advertising is like that. And the best advertising is very much like that. It creates fame. It creates a sense of
it creates a brand, doesn't it? It literally, it's branding, it's imprinting the idea of a company upon your mind. I think a lot of what I see at the moment is a lot of people saying, oh, video ads. When and it's slightly contradictory to your point before, but when the ads come on telly, most people stare at the phone or they go and make a brew, unless the ad is funny or sexy or entertaining, or it's the new Nike ad or something. You know what I mean? And it's an event or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a lot of work done on this, and yes, people do what you said. They look at their phones or they go out of the room, but a lot don't. And actually, certain types of programs, are more glued to the screen more than others, and you don't want to leave the room in case the ad break finishes and then you miss the beginning of the program, or whatever it is. And there's all sorts of reasons why people will be glued to something on the screen, and they will remember stuff that is appealing, entertaining, and has a sense of
as with anything, right? You need to capture it in the first 3 seconds, right? I mean, it's not like that.
Look at you mentioned Nike, and I used to work on Adidas. Look at the Adidas stuff. Look at the Nike stuff. Look at the some of the, if you go back in time, some of the old Coke stuff or the Guinness stuff. And look at the very fact that I could quote you, and you probably could as well, the chimp stuff. That was 40 years ago. So if there's a new chimp commercial, that was sort of news. The new John Lewis commercial every Christmas. I mean, it makes bloody newspaper stories.
I think that, advertising, it feels to me like TV advertising has got much more emotive, and it's much more about the self. Everything is about the self now, and we're competing. We used to say when we're in the music industry that artists now, they're competing with the entire collective avatar ego of the entire world. You're no longer just stood in a queue for a cash machine and you've got a Walkman and you stick a Walkman on. There's no other interruptions. Everybody's got a laptop in their pocket, and they're looking at pictures of themselves and pictures of their friend. And then artists and content makers are like, don't forget us, like people outside of your own mind and your own ego. And I think TV advertising has got much more about the self, and it's got much more emotive. And I think that social advertising, a lot of that stuff, I'm not saying all of it, but a lot of it has got, it misses some of that emotion, like a reason to exist and a reason to believe. It's just like, oh, well, we know we need to put some features and benefits in there. We know we need to stick an offer in there. We know that it needs to be in this format, and it's very it's very, very functional. The best brands we work with are the ones that plant their flag in the ground right from the start, regardless of what any data says, and they say, we want to do this. this is who we're for, and it just makes our job so much easier. We're like, great. The hardest thing to do is when a brand comes and says, yeah, we don't really know who our core customer is. Our product's a bit wishy-washy, and you're just like, well, what the fuck do you want us to do? What do you want us to do with this?
Some of the best brands I've ever worked on are people who do exactly what you just said. I mean, whether you like them or not is irrelevant, but they know exactly what they are, who they're for, and they have a sense of sort of confidence and belief about themselves. So I used to work for probably the brand I've had probably the most to do with in my career has been Coca-Cola. And, you know, I always remember saying to people, once you start to dissemble Coca-Cola, you know, you're finished. What is Coca-Cola? You know, it's a sort of brown fizzy sugar, isn't it, really, that rots your teeth. It's not very good for you. But of course, you don't, you know, what the advertising's managed to do over time is it's sold, brilliantly sold. This notion of refreshment, and it's, you know, it's togetherness, and it's friendliness, and all those sorts of companionship and all that kind of stuff. And they've done it brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly for years and years. And there's I remember reading an excellent book when I used to work on it, an excellent book about Coca-Cola by someone called For God, Country and Coca-Cola. And at the end of it, he tells a story where he says, I went and asked at the end, when I was finishing this book, I went and asked them if I could have the formula. And they said, yeah, why not? By the way, what are you going to do with it if we give it to you?
Yeah, mass produce it.
And he said, well, I could set up Jacobs Cola, you know, in my garage. And they said, okay. Yeah, so what are you going to do with it then? And I said, you know, the guy said, well, I could sell it in competition to you. And he said, okay. So you've got Jacobs Cola, which no one's ever heard of, and we've got Coca-Cola. Which one do you think people will buy? Well, I said, well, it'd be exactly the same thing. Yeah, people don't know that, do they? You know, what are you going to do with it? It's a brand that has been built by brilliant marketing and advertising for, you know, decades. And
I like this. I like the simplicity of some of the stuff Coca-Cola put out, and even on the can, it onboards you. It's got onboarding guidance where it says best enjoyed with ice, and it is a simple little thing like that, and it is best enjoyed with ice, and it is simple. It's as simple as that.
They used to do. They used to bring all their agencies over to Atlanta, you know, once or twice a year, and we'd go and have these sort of come to Jesus type meetings, you know, and they were really interesting. And I remember them telling me once that at the beginning of one of these meetings, one of their big internal marketing meetings, they sat everybody down and they gave everybody a glass. Didn't have ice in it, but it was an iced glass, if you know what I mean. It was cold, very, very cold. And they brought in a bottle of Coke for each person, you know, Georgia Green they're called, you know, the classic Coca-Cola bottle, and a bottle opener. And they said, what we want you to do is to open it, pour it, drink it. Why are we doing this? And they said, because you just forget the magic in this, you know? When you open it, there's that sort of fizz noise, you know? There's a sort of tingling on your tongue when you first drink it. You know, the whole experience is more than just gulping down up.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, like I was recently watching this kind of like online class called Bonfire with Soul, which was put by Duke Stump to work at Nike, and then he worked at Lululemon and, you know, and some other companies, and talking about, you know, really the purpose, you know, that sits behind the brand, and, you know, how do you put it through everything that you do, and the brand becomes, you know, like almost that carrier, almost like you were saying, right, of that purpose, right? It's not really the Coke, is what Coke means, right? It's you know, like Duke was talking about, you know, how, you know, even Lululemon becoming yoga, right? Like it's yoga, right? Like and how, you know, it kind of like paved the way towards that. You know, Nike became the Just Do It, that kind of like almost like anthem, you know, and call of arms of athletes, right? And it's really putting that alongside your brand and really putting, you know, what you could do. We have, you know, one of our the brands that we work with, being Kilo, is, you know, one of Europe's biggest secondhand and vintage clothing, they have a very strong purpose, and what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing, right? In many ways behind to what they do, and it comes all the way to even business decisions. For them, who do they affiliate with or not, the kind of things they make available, to customers or not. Who they hire even, and it's a strong, especially in these days of age where everything comes on a monetary purpose or value, right? Having your, like Wes was saying, putting your flag on the ground and really stating what you stand for, and then making
they're doing something else as well, aren't they? What they're doing, which I think is clever, is they've worked out that every single thing communicates. So everything you do communicates. If you hire the wrong people and the people are rude or they don't answer the phone in the right way, or whenever they come into contact with customers, they don't really exude whatever the brand's purpose and image and everything else, whatever those things are, then you're losing something. I mean, I remember, working on a car brand years ago, and we sent, it was a very desirable car, and we sent a couple of our senior women into the car showroom, and we deliberately dressed them in t-shirts and jeans, and they went into the weekend on their own, so without partner, without husband, without nothing, and they were just completely ignored. And when the salesman eventually, when they went up and asked, it was so patronizing. It was, well, maybe you'd like to come back with your husband, and when it was, but I'm the one with the money and I'm going to buy this car for cash. Even then, it was kind of not really of any great interest to the salesman. Now, what does that say about the car? Actually, quite a lot, doesn't it? I mean, every single thing communicates. You've got to get everything right. So you've got to have, your example of the clothing, you've got to get, it's not just the clothes, but it's the people you hire. It's the whole way in which you communicate the proposition. Everything you do has to put in the same direction, because it's really easy to wreck it.
And it's ultimately a relationship, right? I mean, me and Wes were discussing this, a few days ago. Ultimately, even from a sales point of view, like when we are, pitching to, to prospect clients and stuff like that, it's really what you're doing is building a relationship. You're building trust, like you have to gain that trust, try not only to understand, and then you have to sustain that, through the ups and the downs, because, if there is anything in this marketing world, is that it's a roller coaster, right? I mean, if everything was open to the right, but it ain't. And it's building those relationships. It's understanding how the whole, even ourselves, like the brand of Leaf and, what we stand for, and how do we translate that into the customers, how we make every single touch point feel the other party.
And I think this is where things have gone wrong myself. I know it's not terribly fashionable for media people like me to say this, but I think it was a very big mistake to break media away from creative in the first place. And it's quite interesting now that a lot of agencies are starting to sort of kind of bring them back together in some shape or form. So I think that was a mistake, because what you did was you lost the connection that the media guys had. The media guys looking at data all day. They're looking at the figures, the numbers, and the statistics, and they're not really thinking much about the ads. And once you take them away from where the ads come from, the creative department and where the ads are created, then why would they even care? I mean, I know most media agencies these days, and they would say otherwise, I'm sure, but I can tell you for a fact that a lot of them don't know what the ads are they're placing. They're placing ads for this client. What's the ad say? I don't know. And you sort of, but shouldn't you be part of all that? Shouldn't part of your job be to understand that you're putting something in front of a consumer? So shouldn't you know what it is? Because that might change where you place it, or how you place it, or what you place it on, and that will vary, won't it? By whatever the creative treatment happens to be. So I think that was a mistake. I understand exactly why it happened, and I lived through it, and I was part of it, and I'm very happy to have been part of the media agency world, but I still think it was a mistake. And I think the second thing that's a mistake, I think, is that we've become, as Wes was saying, completely obsessed with data at the expense of worrying about the emotional connection and the content. Of course you need the data, and of course you need to see who you're trying to reach and how many times you reach them, and what happened as a result, and all those things. Of course, I mean, of course, that's really important. But I think you do a much, much better job if you understand and you have some input into what the creative work is and what the sort of soul of the thing is that you're trying to place.
Over Christmas, I read a few biographies from great athletes and and some other like great people. I like to sometimes when I read these, especially if they're autobiographies or at least the person was somewhat involved. It's about understanding the process. It's about understanding their mindset. It's about understanding the pride that sits behind. It's funny that you were joking before about you wanted to become a copywriter and you talk about the example of your daughter before as well. But then really being on it and really wanted to loving ads and being on the industry and really wanted like even us we think like sometimes looking at the purpose behind what you do, why do you wake up every morning, like why, like in our case, we really want to help brands become profitable, like, but it's not any brand, it's about like making people's purpose reality. And it's about enabling people's dreams become true. It's about how do you give people the greatest opportunity for their dreams to come to become reality, right? But it's about that purpose, right? And I think listening to you and even the choices that we make in life about even going and starting as a messenger because that's the way you did it, and and taking pride in what you do and going and staying and going into the pitches in the booth and seeing the things that happen. I wonder like from your point of view, from your experience, because obviously you remain pretty active in the industry, these days, probably on a completely different capacity. But what would you say? What would you advise? People like us, who are arguably kind of like getting started in some of this stuff, compared to your experience, but also to the people on the brand side, like because these days, like companies, might be like two people. In a room and everything else is outsourced, and, we work with some great brands that are like that, but also we work with others that are, like hundreds of people, behind it. But what, in your experience, based on what you're seeing today and what you've seen, before.
Yeah, I think that, I just think the basic principles still matter. I really honestly do. And I think quite often we just forget that. We sort of get all excited because we've got a whole bunch of numbers and we can look at them and all the rest of it. And of course, looking at the numbers and looking at all the data, having all that stuff available, it's great. I mean, I'd be the last person to say that we've gone backwards because of that. I mean, I think we've gone a long way forwards because of that. But I think if you just do that and you forget all the basic principles about what it is you're trying to do, you're trying to either flog something to someone or get someone to buy something that will make them get them to do something that will make them feel better or whatever it is. So go back to the beginning of it. Don't forget that's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to get clicks. It may very well be that in order to get to your objectives, you need clicks, but it's a means to an end. Then it's not just we need clicks, or we've got to have a 30-second cut down of the Observer ad. No, you haven't. What you've got to do is get people to sit at the dinner table the same night, having seen the ad once, and bloody will quote the ad back to you. You want people to connect with your brand and your ad and feel better about it as a result. And there's a lot of stuff that you can easily get forgotten. That can easily get forgotten if you're just obsessing about the media numbers. And I think that my advice would always be to remember what it is you're trying to do. Because what you're trying to do really is, I mean, it could be, as you said, it could be to make people's lives better. It could be to make profit. It could be to, whatever it is, just keep that thing in mind rather than getting obsessed about, the steps along the way that might get you there. And I think that as part of that, you need to understand, the role that the advertising can play, certainly, but that all communication can play. Because you're never gonna get anywhere if you have the loveliest ad for a car in the world, and then you send two people into the showroom and they just mistreat them. Those people are never going to buy the car. They might love the ad, but they just won't buy the car. Why the hell should they buy the car? Because they're being patronized and whatever by the people who are trying to sell them the car. So everything has to kind of work together. Now, okay, cars are an easy one to talk about. That same principle should apply to everything, I think. I mean, I think, whether you're... I mean, there was a story about Coke that they, once upon a time when the president of Coca-Cola used to go on country visits, he would arrive in, I don't know, two town somewhere, some one-horse town in Colombia, say, for sake of argument. And he would be on a site visit. Right? He'll be visiting the local office. And he'll say to the guy would be delighted to have him there. And he would say, "Oh, I've arranged this lovely dinner for you. And we're so grateful you come to Colombia." And the Coke guy would say, "No, I want you to take me to this little tiny village that I've looked up on a map that's 50 miles away, right? We're going to go there now. And when we get there, we're going to go into the one store in that place. And we're going to see what's for sale. And if it wasn't Coke, or if it was Coke but it wasn't cold, the guy would have a problem." Because what the president realized was that at the end of the day, they used to say at Coke, "We build our business one drink at a time." So what they wanted to do, they realized that every single thing they did added to the brand. Everything, from some guy running a corner shop in a town somewhere in the middle of Colombia, to running TV ads, to doing whatever else. So, I think that you've got to work out what it is you want to do, whatever it is, whatever the objectives are, and then everything has to pull in the same direction, and you need to make sure that you deliver on that at every time. So if that means that you've got to, as I'm sure you've seen them in parts of South America and parts of Africa, these big skips, which are basically huge fridges with Cokes in them, like stores for selling cold Cokes. If that's what you do, that's what you do. Because what you're doing is you're bringing Coke to every corner of the world, so people can enjoy it. And you've got to then realize that the advertising is great and can do so much, but having a skip full of ice with cold Cokes in it can do a lot more.
Brian, it's been a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks for lending us your time and and your experience and your stories and your wisdom. Really, it's been such a pleasure having this conversation today, and learning, and also being remind ourselves in many ways what we're doing, and and also in many ways holding us in the industry accountable, all of us every day, because ultimately we're in so much possession and so much responsibility of what's going out there, really, and how things are being built.
It's very kind of you to have asked me, and I really appreciate it. But I've been doing this stuff for a long time, and I only do it because I really like it, And and I think that I just feel that we've gone wrong somewhere, and we risk going badly wrong. And I think we just need to, as Wes was saying, you just sort of get back to what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then go from there, rather than rushing around looking at meaningless stuff, which isn't going to help you at all, really.